Hello, welcome back to Search Sean. This is, of course, another Chat with Sean episode. We've got a great guest today. And yeah, it's really interesting topics as usual. And we kind of pre-agreed them and we're going to go through what we can today. And yeah, as you can see, I'm joined by Luis. Luis is an SEO specialist with a web development background and over 4 years of experience in semantic SEO. He works with e-commerce brands on SEO audits and collaborates across technical, product and marketing teams to improve their search performance. And he has also a really great newsletter, which, if I remember, I'll put a link to in the description so you can go and sign up for that as well. But yeah, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Sweet. Yeah, I'm really interested in this because it's like, especially the semantic stuff, which we're going to touch on first, because we hear a lot about it, especially these days. And it, not everyone really understands really what it means. So first of all, let's kind of get into that. First of all, can you explain the basics of semantic SEO? That's a good place to start.
Well, let's define it organizing the information in a way that it's easier to understand for a semantic search engine what your page or what your site is about. So you categorize your website not only by the architecture, but also with the words and the structure of the page and the content and the entities and the attributes and the predicates and everything in a way that it is structured so well for an LLM, an AI, or any crawler to understand what your page is about, that if that crawler compare how this information is organized compared to your competitors, and you're better off than them, you get an advantage to rank with Google. To summarize would be like how to organize the information semantically. So the cost to understand what product, service, or what you sell on Google is cheaper, faster, easier to understand for a semantic search engine. That would be a good definition.
Yeah, it is. And it really kind of sets us, on track to kind of discuss the rest of it. What is something like, you've probably looked at a lot of this stuff, but what's something that you see people misunderstand the most about semantic SEO, or you see mistakes that are repeated quite a lot that aren't being done properly?
Well, a very important thing, and I do believe that with the last code update and with the last spam update that recently were released, Google is now categorizing the websites based on your semantics. And if the algorithms are not sure what your site is about, they remove the content. I'm going to give an example. I work with a site which is in German and English, and some of the content, even though the theme or the topic, the source context, to talk in terms of terms in semantic SEO, is they're selling trainings, courses, boot camps for people who want to improve their skills in AI, web development, UX, UI, any kind of course or training for improve, let's say, their coding skills and AI skills and so on and so forth. And some of the content, the topics, there is a thin line between technical knowledge and finance, because they're talking about salaries and opportunities and documents you have to, let's say, provide to the government and so on and so forth. So they're, let's say, dancing between 2-3 borders of contents and topics, which is legal information, financial information, and information about the bootcamps. And what happened in the last updates is we're losing traction because now Google showed on the AI overviews content related in Reddit and government sites and finance sites. And also with the last 2-3 core updates, what we've seen is Google has been testing us in a category, not only with bootcamps, but with technology. So we're moving more from a, let's say, informational side about documentation, bureaucracy, finance to, let's say, training, more like kind of academic training. And now we have to balance and rewrite section of the page and section of the content in order not to be classified as a finance, let's say legal and government side, and all that information have to be rewrite to move closer and closer to the category of information that Google think we are, let's say, set up. And that's one of the biggest misconceptions, because we think from the meaning of the words, is that for the meaning of the word, for the definition in the dictionary. But Google classified the information differently than the meaning in the dictionary from the words. So it's not only like set up the architecture and write the titles and the headings and anchor text. No, this is a subsection or a subset of the whole picture from a semantic SEO point of view of a site. It doesn't matter if it is in the finance industry, casino industry, or any industry.
Yeah, very interesting. And do you think I can see that happening quite a lot, to be fair, because, you know, the way that websites have been built in the past and the way content's being produced, and, you know, some of it's very broad or they're not being specific enough and describing actually what they do in enough detail, or, you know, like you say, kind of organizing it correctly. But say you're an established website and you're coming up against these problems without giving yourself like mountains of work, what kind of first few things would you start with?
Well, I would use 3-4 angles. First of all, I start with the, let's say, technical SEO point of view, like crawling, indexing. I get as much information as I can from a search console, let's say, to put the pillar of the technical SEO. But then I gather as much information from the business, because I want to understand first how to categorize that e-commerce or site. And once I have the technical SEO in place, and I have as much information at the business as possible, then I can start optimizing for semantic SEO. Because let's say that the customers of the new client search in a certain way, but the content was not created how the user search. Because a semantic search engine can only group 3 things: queries, users, and documents. Users are the humans that search on Google. Queries is the words they type. And then the documents, it could be a web page, an image, a video, whatever, that is the response to that query. When there is no an alignment of the 3, let's say, the 3 steps, the 3 procedure, the 3 section, let's say, users, queries, and document. When there is no an alignment for that semantic search engine, it's very difficult to understand what the user really want. Because it's not only the kind of user they're searching, but also the words they're using. But those words are coming from their head. Not necessarily the search engine is going to understand right away what that user means. And then Google and other search engines have to find the document on the internet that is going to respond to that query. And in that triangle, we have to be very focused in the intent of the user when they type. It could be informational, it could be transactional, or something in between. It depends on the terms they use to search. And with all of that, let's say, is the overall approach, because I have to set the 3 pillars, let's say, technical SEO, information about the business, and then I start with the semantic SEO. That's my approach.
Yeah, and it's not so much, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not so much about like old school sort of keyword matching. It's more about, like you say, understanding that intent behind the query that the user puts in. Well, how does like well-structured content, I mean, obviously it differ, like you say, between, I guess, in the industry that you're working in, whether that's e-commerce or whether that's whatever. What does like a good content piece look like in your eyes, if it's like fully sort of optimized for what you're talking about?
Well, coming back to the example we used previously, the site that had, let's say, gibberish content between 3 or 4 categories, what I do now is, first of all, I don't create a semantic content network until I understand the business information on who are the real customers, because I need to understand how they search and what they want. And it depends on how they search and what they want. Then I set up the strategy for the content. But overall, because I mostly work with e-commerce, what I do is in the main content, which means title, headings, and at the top of the page, I target the transactional queries. And in the supplementary content, which is roughly from the middle to the bottom, I target informational queries. So one document, one page answer both the transactional and the informational responses. And that information is not created from, let's say, with information I got from SEO tools. That information is based on the real user and customers. So that's when the information about the business come into place. Because I don't, let's say, over the last 3-4 years, I don't rely that much on information from SEO tools. I work with the information about the business, Search Console, and the Screaming Frog or any other crawler. And I spend way more time understanding the real customer or the client. Where are they, how they search, what they want, what kind of product or services they're looking for, and what terms do they use. And then I fine tune the page based on that information. But again, if we're targeting e-commerce, transactional queries at the top with a call to action, of course, preferably above the fold. So both from a visual semantic point of view, from the UX user experience, the user is, let's say, either buy a product, get information about the product. When with the landing page, they have the product, the call to action, the basic information. And if they want to explore more, they can scroll down and they can get FAQs or videos or further information. So that's the overall approach.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, how has this kind of changed? Like in terms of since AI has come into play, because a lot of that seems like best practices. It should have probably been the way for many people before this all sort of kicked off in terms of AI search. Has that just highlighted it more? Do you know what I'm saying? Has it changed much since AI search come into play more than it was before?
Over the last 6 to 8 years, I've been more focused on visual semantics, which means you structure the page also that visually the user and the bot as well is going to identify the information right away. And it's going to, let's say, more or less assess what the page is about. I'm going to give you an example. I work with an insurance company here in Spain, and we created one custom image per page. And in that image, we include what I call the 3 key elements, which is the logo, which means this image belongs to the brand, and then the product we're trying to sell, and then text that describe the product and target the user intent, which means insurance for whatever. And then the logo of the brand, and then the product itself. So, because at the end of the day, you have to think like you are verbalizing, you're communicating at a different layers of information with images, video, text, everything. So you have to structure the information in a way that you are feeding bots at all levels: schema, text, images, video, anything. So I'm going to give you an example. I saw a few weeks ago a bot that only consume pixels. So dissect the page by pixels, and I can identify what is the heading, what is the image, what the page is about only with pixels. So you don't need to crawl and render the whole HTML, CSS, JavaScript of a page. So that bot, let's say, is launched by the browser and load the page and then analyze pixel by pixel on the whole page and can summarize what the page is about, just, let's say, burning pixels rather than crawl, budget, and all this stuff. So what's going on, in my opinion, nowadays is like you are better off if above the fold you show to the user and to the bots the key information so the user can decide. both visually and with text or images or video. That would be like, or that's been my approach for, especially over the last year, I would say.
Yeah. It's a very good approach, and obviously makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? That's right. I talk to great people like yourself and others. This stuff kind of sounds so obvious in a way, but it actually, when you look around the web, it isn't actually implemented that often. But it does make a lot of sense, obviously, with the AI bots as well. Like we all know, they are very short on time and patience, and they want to find that information as quick as they can and understand what it's about and who's the best to go to. So, yeah, as you say, that makes a lot of sense. And in terms of like, I think you kind of covered this, but I'll just ask it just in case you got anything to add. But like, what are the other indicators on a page? Like you're checking a page that you can actually make sure it's semantically aligned with Google in terms of what they're expecting to see. Is there any other sort of tips and tricks that you have around that?
Yes. So I'm going to focus on the semantic SEO terminology, which is source context, which means basically what product or service do you sell in the page? Is that clear? From a semantic point of view, which means the words that you use in the page. If only an LLM can digest the text in the page, is that LLM is going to understand what the page is about? Are you selling a product? Is it a CBD product, CBD oil, or another CBD product, for instance? And then that's from the source context. And then central search intent. The query that, let's say, is generating the traffic for you, is that clear? Is it informational or transactional? And did you cover the answer to the query in the page or not? Have you structured the information properly? So let's say you have a product about CBT and the user want to know what's the percentage of any substance in the product itself. Have you provided that information in the page? If it is not that information in the page, Google is not going to give you the traffic if your potential customer is searching for that key things. So we have source context, central search intent, and then you organize the page in a way that you cover the entity, the attributes, and the predicates. So are you organizing the information from top to bottom in the right way? Do you have an image? Do you have the brand? Are you describing the product properly? Is the description clear enough? Or is it repeated from another CBD sites because you get the information from an API? All these kind of tiny little details combined are the ones that give you the advantage, I would say. So that would be my answer. But basically is think about how would you differentiate yourself from the competitors from a semantic point of view. Is what extra value would you add compared to other sites, and what information they are missing that you're going to include in your page. So that means you have done your research, which means, are you targeting the entity? Which attributes are important? It depends on the region. Let's say you have a CBD online shop and you're targeting several countries. Maybe it is more important from other countries, specific information about the product than from other regions. Have you include that information? Because maybe, let's say that you have an online CBD shop and then you're targeting Germany, Sweden, France, and 2 or 3 more countries. It's not the same. They're not worried about the same things in each country. So if you, let's say, create the same content in 4 or 5 languages, but you don't care about the teeny tiny details about those customers, it's going to be cheaper and faster for you to create that content, but long term, you're not going to be satisfied, neither the user nor the queries. So eventually, you're going to get less traffic.
Yeah, actually, because touch upon, I was about to say as well, it's like, there's a lot of people been saying you should be, focus on the intent of the user, and that makes a lot of sense. But as you know, like in many cases on web content, there's people have all different, so slightly different intents, but they still kind of need the same content, or the product still sort of suits them, but they have slightly different intents to each other. So how do you make sure I mean, you kind of just touch on the location side, but what's the best way of making sure that you're covering different forms of intent, but you're still making clear like about the entity and about what it is and its benefits and all that kind of thing?
This is a very good follow-up question, and I'm going to share it with you how we evolved. I'm going to use the example of the insurance company. At the beginning, it was only, let's say, text and call to action and question and answer related to in order to eliminate the objection of the customer. Then we evolved with images and prices, and images with prices in order to satisfy both the visual semantics and let's say, semantic SEO overall. And now we are including in the landing pages videos, because the user, when they land in the page, can consume the information both visually and the video. And the video itself is, first of all, it's easier to consume. You are feeding several bots at a time because you provide the thumbnail and the video itself. And it's an extra, of course, videos are very short, 30 seconds to a minute. And the video itself is a kind of, have several functionalities. It's a little bit of salesman, but it's also a little bit of, let's say, ranking, and also satisfy the user intent, because if you can explain in a minute or 30 seconds what the product is about, what this insurance is going to cover, and so forth, in less than a minute, is more likely that the user take action, because you're going to eliminate all the objections. So in one simple page, we cover several layers of information with text, images, video, and then at the bottom we have FAQs, and at the top we have let's say, the message to the market and the call to action. So we cover all the angles in one page in order to maximize the, let's say, to maximize the good user experience. At the same time, we feed all the bots. And in one single page, we cover the information on the transactional queries. But of course, this has been an evolution over years. I mean, let's say with this company, I've been working for 6 years, and we have evolved systematically with the changes we will have been doing. I mean, our page now is more visual because, let's say, users spend more time on social media, and in social media, there is almost no text. Everything is visual, audio, or video. And that's how we organize now our information.
Yeah. And like, you know, people like Mark Williams, Cook, and others have said, if it's better for the user and also it helps the bots, then why wouldn't you do that? It's the best of both worlds. It's like, you know, you're not going one way or the other. You know, there's people talking about some sort of techniques that could go full in on AI's optimization, but in fact, that could potentially harm the user experience. But this kind of technique seems to be like, you know, harnessing both of those. And but before we wrap up on the semantic side of it, I've got a couple more questions on that. If for those who, like, I don't know, for whatever reasons, thinking like this is a lot of work, or I'm not going to get around to doing this, or whatever, what is the damage potentially in the future if things continue in the way that how these models are looking at sites and evaluating them, and what are the potential damages or issues that could happen if you don't take this kind of philosophy on board?
Well, let's think for a moment that everything is heading towards AI and LLMs, and semantic SEO is now very popular term in SEO overall. But think about, from a computational point of view, the cheapest way you can digest information, or let's say most LLMs rely on text. So you can transcribe audio, video, anything to text, and then analyze that text. For instance, you can transcribe a YouTube video to text, and it's going to be faster, cheaper, and easier to understand that instead of consuming the whole video, because you're going to need 20, 30 minutes or an hour. It depends on how long is the video. However, you can transcribe the video to text and feed an LLM or any AI with that text. And the LLM is going to know in seconds, or even less than seconds, what the video is about, the people there, what are they talking, the topics, in which minute they say whatever. So that's why, from my point of view, semantic SEO is going to become more and more important. Because again, if the internet grows bigger and bigger and bigger, and there is more and more and more information, eventually the algorithms are going to rely on the cheapest way to understand everything. And besides pixels, like the bots I say about pixels, well, you can, let's say, a percentage of information you can digest it with pixels, but only the visual information. But a video, you cannot, let's say, chop a video with pixels. You can chop only the thumbnail and the face of the 2 or 3 people that are in the video. But all the information about the video, what they talk about and everything, you're not going to get it with pixels. So it's a mix between pixels, bytes, and let's say different ways to organize the information. But overall, semantic SEO is going to become more and more important. So if you're not that passionate, let's say, about semantic SEO, at least cover the basics, because long term, you're going to have an advantage with other SEOs that haven't a clue about semantic SEO, basically.
Yeah, which leads me on to obviously your newsletter, which you're very proactive on. And, I read it whenever I can, to be honest. But what have you been covering lately on that? And what could people learn if they subscribe to that newsletter?
Well, basically, I have a newsletter where every day I write an email to, let's say, share something about semantic SEO or a concept that is related with semantic SEO. Because I cannot preach something if I do the opposite, which means I'm improving myself, writing every day. No AI, no nothing. Real, let's say, every single email has been created by hand. Why? Because I want to improve my communication skill, writing skills, because in the long term, when everybody or most people write everything with AI, those few that use their copyrighted skills, writing skills, and communication skill are they're gonna differentiate themselves from the crowd, and are gonna have an advantage. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing, basically. And also to, let's say, get my ideas out of my head and communicate them as effective as possible. Because let's say that most humans use AI and do not interact with other humans. So if you don't practice communication with other human and sharing ideas with another person, and it is an ability that over time you're going to do less and less, you're going to lose your ability to communicate with a human. And if you lose your ability to communicate with a human, how are you going to communicate with a bunch of humans or thousands of humans if you don't know how to communicate with one? So which means your communication abilities overall is going to decay. That's why I'm doing, let's say, something that looks like contradictory, but I do believe that long term is going to be an advantage.
Yeah, well, I can't argue with that. And that's kind of why I did this channel, to be honest, with, well, for many reasons, but one of them was to improve that communication skills and that kind of thing as well. And so, yeah, build contacts and keep communication with people. Because, yeah, you can get very, especially as an SEO, you could be locked away in your room, cracking on with your work, and you don't have to talk to anyone really if you don't want to. So, yeah, it's a good point. And what was the kind of like last few sort of topics that you touch upon in your newsletter to give people a little flavor of what they could expect?
Well, let's say I don't have a specific topic. But what I'm going to talk about in the coming days is my opinion about what Google is testing in the last couple of days, which is, first of all, the algorithms they're running are there to categorize your site in a group of information. And when you are categorized there, if the semantics of your page, the content, the images, the videos, the information there is in alignment with the category that Google think you are competing or you are, let's say, grouped by, then there is an alignment and they're going to give you traffic. And if there is no match, there is no relationship, but there is no, let's say, cohesion, your site is not going to rank because Google thinks you're writing and selling one thing and your copy and the information there is contradictory and you're not going to rank. I mean, to give you an example, we have been massive ups and downs in several niches where in theory, sites that have been selling the same thing for 20 years. I mean, for instance, the insurance company have been since 1998. We've been like 28 years selling insurance. And Google is still not clear one specific landing page. There are, let's say, massive ups and downs in traffic because of what? Because they're testing algorithms, because the copy has been there for, I would say, years now, with only fine-tuning little things. And we're only changing, let's say, images, little things, and still algorithms doesn't understand a lot of stuff. And again, we're going back to how the user search, because how the user search and that query, Google tries to connect that query with a landing page. Let's say, let me give you an example to make it easier. Let's say that we're selling insurance for, you are an expat that coming to Spain and you need a new car license and car license plate. And temporarily you have the red one or the green one here in Spain. Guess what? People search green or red car license number for cars. But that query is not in our page. And Google is trying to match that query with our content, but that terms are not in our content. And Google is like trying to do a puzzle and the pieces the pieces don't match. So once we saw the new information, how the user searching and Search Console, we rewrite the copy of the page and then Google is doing the match because the user wants what the user really, really, really want is not a red or a green car license number for their car. What they want is an insurance because they're moving from one country to another and they need a temporary car license number until they got the new one. But again, if you don't know the business, if you don't know the customers, if you don't know how to communicate that and do the match for the search engines, you can spend all the time you want with SEO tools, doing market research, whatever you want. You're not going to get it. So that's the change in mindset, because as you mentioned at the beginning, for decades, we have been matching keywords to document. You just put the keyword in the document and Google sends you traffic. It doesn't matter if the user is happy or not. Eventually you get the traffic. But now it's more like the puzzle is more complex. And you have to put everything in alignment and together. If not, it's not going to work.
Yeah, that's a really good example, actually, how you put that. It's a bit like, obviously, at the beginning, search engines were struggling to know the difference between Apple, the fruit, and Apple, the organization. Now they've got in more intelligent. They know the differences between all that. But now they're working on the next round of intent, what really they want, not just, like you say, number plates, but they actually want the whole thing behind the number plate. And I think they've still got a lot, like you can see anyway, Google, a lot of patents they put in around intent, trying to understand intent more. That's definitely something they're going after a lot more. And But they have got work to do. Because even I've done some recent searches, and I'm like, these companies aren't really selling what I'm looking for. They're very like adjacent to what I'm trying to look for. Yeah, I can kind of see where they're going with it. But in 2026, I did kind of expect better results. But I guess that's what we've been discussing all this time, you know?
Yeah, and also think about that. 7 to 10 years ago, we used max 2, 3 words. Now we use long sentences, 7 to 8 words. And to parse that string and really understand each meaning of each word is a more complex thing. And then with, let's say, with AI interfaces, now you can speak directly and your queries could be even 10 to 12 terms. So how are you going to match that? It's like how Google is going to match those 7 to 10, 12 words with a document. With the old system, it makes sense because it's 2, 3, yeah. But now it's more like, that's why we come back to semantic SEO, understanding the real meaning and the real intent of the query.
Yeah, and similar to you, I don't really use the SEO tools in the same way that I used to, like in terms of keyword research or something. Like maybe for guidance on some occasions, but mainly it's just using that actual user data, you know, whether that's from, like, say, Search Console or from our internal search data, you know, that kind of thing. Let's switch gears before we finish up because I want to talk about, obviously, your e-commerce sort of background. When you start like a new e-commerce SEO audit, what are these that kind of steps you go over? And it'd be interesting how this semantic leaks into the kind of goes into like the Google My Business feed sort of area as well.
Yeah, let's say, I'm going to give you a similar example. Let's say that the e-commerce is in Spain or any other country, and they're targeting national market. So you create the Google Business Profile Manager and you optimize that profile to narrow down the categories and the information of that business. And then you expand, when you have the main entity, you expand on the attributes of the, let's say, the brand itself. Let's say you have a multilingual and multi-region market. So it's the same. Is first of all, the category of information you are competing with, or let's say in which market you are competing. It doesn't matter if it's real estate, CPG, insurance, whatever. And once you get the category of information, then you decide, okay, which entities am I targeting and which attributes in those entities we're going to cover. So let's say real estate. Okay, if you're targeting real estate, house is the same. You can translate the terms and it's the same entity. But if you are, let's say, targeting residencies, private rooms, apartments, houses, so you're, let's say, making wider and wider and wider the topic, even though the same topic is real estate. Because to give another example, I work with an international and multi-region, let's call it e-commerce in real estate. We are targeting several markets. But then we have to mix the topics between universities, residencies, private rooms, shared rooms, and so on and so forth. And we have like, okay, we have the house, we have the students, and we have the country. But then we have also the cities. The cities, because Erasmus in whatever city. But once you get too far with the city, the topic is kind of the semantic distance between an apartment and a city is very big. You cannot talk about much about the city because if not, you are moving very, very close to another vertical, which could be tourism, or could be holidays, or could be another market. Because instead of targeting students, it depends on the word you use. You could be targeting workers or people that are looking for short-term time in that cities, and they don't want a long-term apartment And that's why the semantics play, let's say, a key role, because it depends on the words you use. You are, let's say, going in a short distance semantically or a long distance semantically. And the longer you are, the longer the semantic distance, the worse for you, because Google don't understand if you're targeting a specific market for students or for workers or for holidays or for long-term rental. So you have to be very picky. And that would be my approach also to e-commerce, because you can target color, size, ingredients, or whatever, but one word can change the semantic distance between one niche and another. So first of all, business information, second the markets, and then the products, which means defining the entity and the attributes. And then expand, but not expand that much, because if not, Google might categorize you in a different, let's say, group of information, and then is when you're going to lose a lot of traffic.
So if you've got a particular, when you lay out your audits, so if you've got like a particular way you lay it out, like in a spreadsheet, and there's certain tools and stuff that you use, but in particular, put us in that mindset when you're doing that audit. What does it look like?
I'm Leo, the co-founder of Linkavista. I spent 10 years of my career building backlinks for the toughest niches. Think about crypto, finance, and gambling. During this time, I spent over 1 million euros of backlinks easily. However, all the backlink marketplace, they were missing something. So we built something different at Linkavista. Linkavista is a backlink marketplace with more than 60,000 websites, and you will find the right one in only 2 clicks. On thousands of them, we connect straight to the Google Search Console, so you see the real traffic every time. And with the lowest fees on the market, we are the cheapest price that you will find on over 20,000 websites easily. Honestly, the numbers I'm giving you are probably already wrong. Our catalog has more than doubled in the last few months and it's still exploding. So head to linkavista.com and use the code SHAN10 for 10% extra credit on your first order. That's linkavista.com.
I'm Matt, co-founder of SEO Gets, the easiest way to analyze and report on your Search Console and GA4 data. We've crafted SEO Gets around 4 areas of every campaign: prioritization, strategy, tracking, and reporting. Most tools treat every page the same, but the best SEOs focus on the pages that actually matter. Our one-click setup tracks your content groups, lets you prioritize them, and keeps what matters most front and center. Now that you're focused, you need a strategy. Content decay, cannibalization issues, striking distance keywords, you name it. Every answer is now one click away. And speaking of being busy, you can't always be watching your site. Our index reporting catches important pages falling out of Google's index, and our Chrome extensions lets you create annotations from anywhere, so you can measure the impact of every change. And finally, reporting. The worst part of the job, but possibly the most important. Create live client portals for stakeholders, easily export any chart as a PNG, or use the annotations tab to show the impact of your work over time. Prefer to use SEO Gets as a context and enrichment layer for your own AI setup? Connect our MCP in seconds. Annotations, indexing health, and prioritized content groups, all helpful for your MCP stack. And did I mention unlimited websites and users on every plan? So get started today with our 14-day free trial, no credit card needed. Connect your Search Console and you're up and running in seconds.
Like I structured from in a cascade style, like a main category, subcategories, and then inside those subcategories, the product and which attributes for that entity we're going to target. So it's a mix between the information from the business plus the information we got from other tools to know how the user search and which terms are close to the topic or not. And then we fine tune each page. Let's say, going back to the insurance example, we spot an opportunity because we're not using the word online. And from a user point of view, when some of them type, let's say, insurance online, and some of them don't include the word online. But semantically, both of the user and for LLM, if you include the word online, automatically segment down or reduce the universal data and remove buying insurance, let's say, in the traditional way, in the offline world. So that's why each word have a meaning and is very important. Or let's say we target even though English and Spanish have different meanings, but in Spanish, cheap doesn't have negative connotation like probably in English, because you can use synonyms like more affordable, better price, competitive price, and so on and so forth. But in Spanish, we can use barato, which means cheap, literally cheap. But barato doesn't necessarily mean, doesn't have a negative connotation, because, let's say, both for the user and semantically means better price than other sites or cheapest. So with that tiny changes, you automatically are moving your brand from, let's say, this is luxury brands will not include in their words cheap or any terms that have that connotation. They remove automatically every word that is not semantically aligned with the product they're selling. That's why the luxury brands have almost no text. It's just white and the image, because let's say it's like words are going to poison the product. So you have to be very picky.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So say, you have a service, you offer it online, but you also offer it offline, in a shop or wherever. Do you need to have two separate offerings so you don't, cloud the waters or whatever they call it?
I would, let's say, it's not my case, but let's say I work with a brand that you can buy the product offline and online. I would clearly organize the information. So I will include the word online to target the market that want to buy online. But if you can buy that product physically in a shop, I would definitely organize the information to make the user aware that have the two options. Because when the user type buy products, whatever, and do not include the word online, how the search engine is going to know if you as a consumer, do you really want to go physically to a shop to buy that product, or do you want to buy online? The machine is not going to be able to discern. So you have to think, you have to think that way.
Yeah, and it's a totally different experience, isn't it? Because, obviously buying something online is a total different experience than going to a shop. You're going to need to know where the hell it is. How do you get there? Is there parking? What time is it opening? Online, you need to know about return information, any discount codes, these sort of things. It's a total different experience, isn't it?
Absolutely. And to give you a specific example, last year I worked with a jewelry company, and this jewelry company in Spain had physical shop in the main cities. And we studied the intent of the user. And we spot that when most users type either the street or location of the shop, we, let's say, did a test and assume that people want to go physically there to buy the product rather than online. And we were right, because we created a custom landing page for, let's say, physical shop that gather higher search volume. And we didn't get that much clicks when the user types the street or the name of the shop, because the user want to know where it is. And probably on the weekend, the woman that want to buy that product is going to go physically to shop around that place and buy the product there. But the traditional SEO approach is, one landing page for every single shop, because we're going to target local SEO and we're going to get a bunch of traffic because there is a lot of search volume. But you're not going to focus on the user intent or what the user really wants. You're just focusing on search volume and where you think is going to work. So,
100%. Yeah. And one thing that did crop to my mind, I know people are going to say this because I especially come up against this everywhere I work, basically, but especially when I worked agency side, is, sometimes getting information about a brand or data about their customers and this kind of thing is like getting blood out of a stone. It's extremely difficult sometimes to get that information. Okay, you may be able to get out of their sort of search console data. Hopefully, that's not always a given. But to say it's hard to like get that information, how do you even? Is it even possible to do without that information?
Well, over the last 3 years, I spend more time with my clients in their offices, and I do my own research. I'm going to give you an example. Going back to the jewelry company, thankfully, they have 2 shops here in Malaga, one in Marbella, one in Malaga. And I moved there physically and I spent a couple of hours just looking at the women's and so on. And also compare and contrast the information I got from the shops with the information with the woman in the gym. So I went to the gym and each day I asked a woman, hey, do you like chokers? I didn't know what chokers was. So anyway, I asked women, do you like chokers? Yeah. What kind of chokers do you want? Do you like chokers with gold, chokers with silver, sides, all this stuff? And they give you the information. And then I got that information. I compare and contrast with Search Console and all the SEO tools. And we spot that we also saw on the search that Google was showing way more images. And let's say we optimize for visual semantics, which is, hey, if I type chokers, gold chokers, women, and whatever city, now all of a sudden on the search, we got a bunch of images in the snippets. Guess what? We're going to enhance each landing page for product images because Google is telling you, hey, the women want to see visually the product.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? And like, so you don't necessarily need that. There's a lot of signals that you can look at to kind of give you that data. And like you say, I don't know who it was I was talking to, it may have been Dave Cousins I talked to around, the SERP can give you a lot of indications. Like you put in something, you can see across the top, what are the areas it's showing up? Is it showing up images as one of the main things? Is it showing up shopping? Is it showing up whatever it is? That gives you a big indication of what they deem the most relevant sort of categories and things when it comes to a certain query. Finishing off the last couple of things. So how do you decide, like, how do you prioritize issues like your end? Like, how do you actually prioritize what's worth fixing first of all versus deprioritization and doing that later or not doing it at all?
Basically, what I do is when I do the audit, I try to assess which optimization is going to enhance more pages all at once, which means if we fix either technical or semantic things, how many pages are going to benefit from that optimizations? And if the bigger the number, the better, because the impact is going to be bigger with the same amount of effort. That would be my approach. That's been my approach with everything, either in web performance optimization or semantic SEO optimization, visual semantics, whatever. That's my approach overall.
Yeah, I suppose you want to make sure they are like high priority pages, not just like low level sort of pages. But I'm presuming that you've done that analysis initially.
Yeah, so basically is, let's say, identify the pages that get most of the traffic, and then I try to assess if an optimization of those pages is going to create a snowball effect in more pages, either in crawling or anchor text or whatever. But again, I think holistically, I think that the product overall, that's why I focus on the biggest impact with the least effort.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. Like template fixes or something like this. Okay, last one. In terms of this, I think something, a lot of people struggle with, especially large sites, especially large sort of e-com sites. How do you approach the sort of internal linking at scale without becoming like too messy or too manual? It's a tricky job, but we know how important internal linking is. Just as much as it has ever been, really.
Yeah, so when big sites, especially e-commerce sites, I try to focus on connect pages when there is a semantic relationship between either one category to another, one product to another. Because at the end of the day, the bigger the site, the more picky you have to be with how to enhance the crop budget. So again, we assess the site overall, and then we identify the semantic relationships between pages and how can we enhance the anchor text and the interlinking in a way that transfer much page rank without demoting or let's say, reducing the overall value of the e-commerce.
Yeah. And finally, I think if you did it, say you do link out to like loads of random pages that don't really make much sense on the page, like, you're talking about hiking and then you got links to just random products and services that don't really relate to that in any way. What is the potential consequences of doing that? Could that potentially damage what you're trying to do with that page?
Yes, because the page rank is not focused on something related and you're devoting the value overall. So let's say another common approach in the past in SEO is you link like crazy. And with anchor text and with variation, all this stuff. Now with semantic SEO, you have to be more focused on connecting semantically one page to another, one category to another, in order to create a kind of interconnection of topics to, again, make easier for Google and other LLMs to understand what your site is about. And especially nowadays with sites with a lot of topics, a lot of news, a lot of blogs and all this stuff have been demoted, because if you cover 3, 4, 5 topics in one blog, all of a sudden Google doesn't know what your site is about, and it's more costly, more messy for them to understand. Okay, this brand is talking about this specific information, and that's why, in my opinion, it's going to be even worse. I mean, this is not new. When you cover more than one topic, you have to be very careful, or your brand have to be very powerful, because if not, you're not going to rank that easy.
Yeah. And that's why it's always important to look at that customer data, because, if you could back it up that people will look at this, also seem to look at this and be interested in this, even though it may not seem obvious at the beginning it has that relationship. But if you can back that up with data proving it has that relationship, I guess that makes sense. But yeah, it's just common sense, isn't it? When you're reading as a human, you're reading a bit of text and it's about a certain subject, and suddenly something random comes out of left field about something completely different. You're like, what the hell has this got to do with anything? So yeah, it makes sense. Okay, well, let's wrap it up, because it's still hot over here and I'm struggling to keep talking, to be honest, because us Brits aren't used to this kind of weather like you are over there. But it's been really interesting. I think, get into the flow of like so many more questions, but we'll wrap it up and hopefully we get you back on at some stage, Luis. But thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.